It's a class struggle. It's them and us. It always has been. It still is. People want to butter it up. It's not like that. It is a class struggle.
In the building industry, everything's in a state of change. What's safe one minute becomes unsafe the next. Where there was no hole before, there's a hole there now. So safety required constant vigilance.
When Martin Kingham stood to observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect for workers who died on construction sites, he temporarily silenced the 2001 Coal Royal Commission. Coal called it a stunt, but for the members of the CFMEU, it was all part of an ongoing campaign.
He asked for a minute's silence, and everyone stood up and did that minute silence. I don't think Terry Cole, the commissioner, was very happy about it. He was a bit upset about it, but nevertheless, we thought that was the proper thing to do. So the whole gallery and everyone who was there stood up and did that.
I stood up and I called on everybody in the courtroom to join me in the building industry's sort of traditional response when we talk about someone who's killed. We pause and reflect. We didn't want to be in that commission, but obviously the most important problem in our industry is deaths. And there's people being killed at work. It happens all too often.
We are building something in the sky that's not there. So it is a very dangerous industry, no doubt about that. And every time you cut a corner, then you multiply the odds against you of having an accident. There's no doubt about that.
Never let it get out of the hands of the union. It's the union's responsibility, not some government organisation, not some employer grouping. The union had to ensure that it didn't lose control of safety.
It's going back a long time, and sometimes I wonder if it did happen because it's going back, but I was on a job where 2 blokes got killed in the city here, and their bodies got put in the sandbox and put on the back of the truck and taken away. And it was a big shit fight over there.
Bearing in mind that right up to late 60s, you still walked still. You still rode the hook of a crane. If that's not unsafe, you tell me what is unsafe.
I got a job pulling down the Old Savoy Theatre. We come to work on Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning. You used to stand up there with a pick or sledgehammer. You might have 10, 20 men on a wall. People would come into town with their deck chairs and their thermos flasks and sandwiches and sit over the road watching the workers knocking these walls down. And at times, you'd be knocking a wall down and the wall had decided it was going to go down on its own. And you used to have to jump or run or go like hell to get off it one way or the other.
It was referee's rules then, sort of thing. No? And I mean, if you decided that one plank on a scaffold was safe enough, well, that was it. You didn't have to put 5 on, you could have 1 on it. So, I mean, it was just everybody was doing as they liked, sort of thing. No? The recipe for disaster.
The building unions got together and had a massive campaign on fall protection on the sites. The main thing was a complete perimeter scaffold. We had no man hoist in those days. You'd walk up the stairs until the stairs ran out, then you'd climb up the ladderways until the ladderways ran out. Then you'd have a couple of ladders tied to the steel. You climbed them in the last 3 floors. You climbed up the columns. Guardrails, well, if you could get guardrails on the job, you had guardrails. If you couldn't get them, well, you didn't go too close to the edge or you didn't fall off the edge. And if people were injured or if someone was killed on the site, the grapevine would run through the sites. The blokes would walk off the job and they say, right, our blokes are coming to work to build buildings, not to be killed.
And that led to a lot of industrial disputes on site. And consequently that badged unions as being more militant, but what they were actually doing was just being more militant in protecting their members' health and safety on a day-to-day situation at the workplace.
Yeah, you get out there, you never know what's going to happen. You know, like I worked at a job where we had a serious accident down at Genesanos where one of the blokes came down from the 3rd floor, and I was the first one to get to him. And when you sort of look at it and you think his guy was 32, fell, all busted up, you know, broken back and legs, and wife in hospital having a baby the day before, and you never know. I mean, it's just an industry that unfortunately it is like that. You know, you never know what's going to happen.
A span of the new Westgate Bridge in Melbourne collapsed today, killing at least 28 people and injuring many others. Rescue crews are digging under piles of twisted metal and wood to try and locate 21 men. The Victorian Premier, Sir Henry Bolte, announced tonight that a royal commission will investigate the disaster.
Well Services was behind on the contract. They got sacked, and then John Holland got the contract, and then we all got picked up with John Holland. Been working with John Holland for about 6 months, and then we found out that a bridge in Wales, Milford Haven Bridge, collapsed, killed 4 workers about a month before. We found out it was the same company. We found out it was the same type of bridge, box girder bridge. So one day we just refused to go to work. We sat in the shed until somebody gave us insurances that the bridge was safe. Jack Hineshaw, he was the engineer, came down, told us he was the best bridge builder in the world. If it wasn't safe, he wouldn't be there, and we had to have faith in him. He ordered the bolts to come out. He got killed and took 34 other people with him. We got Monday off with pay. We went back to work on Tuesday, and we all got dismissed, all got sacked, every one of us. 24 hours after we got sacked, I went to 9 funerals in one day, 5 funerals the next day. Traumatised, no counselling, nobody come and seen us. The only people look after us were the unions. Nobody came to our door, nobody offered us compensation. You're unemployed, you've got no work, and you don't want to work because you're just not mentally state, and nobody looking after you. It's a pretty tough time in life to get through.
After the collapse, I think the whole building and construction industry, right throughout Australia, become more aware of the need for safety on construction sites. Everybody become aware.
That disaster galvanised construction workers and the unions to not only demand a safe workplace, but also it started a campaign to see those demands put into legally enforceable rights, and not just relying on an engineer's word that something was safe. And that campaign eventually led to the introduction of the 1985 Occupational Health and Safety Act, and that had provisions in there where workers in all industries had the right to elect their own occupational health and safety representatives, and it also had provisions in there that stipulated that employers had a legal obligation to provide a safe workplace.
It was a breakthrough. It was something which hadn't happened. So instead of having to have a stop work meeting to say this isn't right and we're going out the gate unless you fix it, having somebody to go up on your behalf with a little bit of health and safety knowledge and get the situation improved.
It changed the workplace dramatically, as all unions could now elect occupational health and safety reps from their rank and file, train them, back them up, and make sure that they knew their rights on site.
One of the bad things about getting injured on the sites at those times, of course, was the insurance company's refusal to pay workers' compensation.
In the 70s, we had many marches of building workers in Melbourne in particular, where we marched up and down the street and occupied insurance companies because they weren't paying injured worker their due entitlements. And we'd also then march after that up to Parliament House and demand better laws.
That resulted in the insurance companies and the unions meeting together and coming to a system where if someone was injured on the site, there wouldn't be any of this bodgy holding up or, the computer's broken, we can't get a report on that, which was all the excuses I used to use. We managed to knock that on the head and get workers' compensations payments made quite rapidly when someone was injured.
And then have the employer worry about getting it off the insurance company, rather than have the worker and the union chasing up the insurance company. The employer is the one who insures himself. Let him chase his insurance company.
Those marches and campaigns in the 70s and early 80s led to the most radical reforms in Victorian legislation, with the Accident Compensation Act being passed for workers' comp. You now had a statewide scheme that guaranteed that they got paid for when they were off work.
I've worked in the construction industry for about 35 years, and back when I first started, there wasn't a lot of regulations about. It was the unions who actually had to get there and campaign for health and safety. But I suppose the biggest down came in was during the Kennett years, when Kennett came in and deregulated all the health and safety acts.
He was stuck with the Victorian Occupational Health and Safety Act, so he deregulated a lot of the regulations that hung off the Act and replaced them with just sort of simple objectives about, you're supposed to have a workplace where you can't fall or you can't get hit on the head, whatever, but not the actual nuts and bolts about how to get there. And the fatalities, they climbed dramatically.
Deregulation leads to bad health and safety, leads to companies taking productivity shortcuts, leads to accidents and deaths in industry.
So the union developed a campaign that if there was a worker killed in the industry, then the next day the whole industry would stop. And that sort of then forced employers could see that their projects would get stopped, even though there might not have been a death on their particular site. It forced an industry approach to dealing with the issue.
We really were able to turn that corner again from the peak of the bad Kennett years and reduce the fatality rate dramatically in the years that followed that policy.
It wasn't a campaign that lasted a year or two. It's a campaign that's basically everlasting, and it's a campaign that's still there today.
We've seen a serious deterioration in safety around the construction industry under the ABCC. Workers need collective power in order to hold employers accountable for safety in our industry. The pressures which are on workers, which are on subcontractors and which are on employers are enormous, because the reality is that the quicker the job is finished, the more profit is made and captured by the developer and by the banks who finance them.
I've seen some terrible conditions. I mean, when I first started in the industry, we used to have our lunch sitting on a bag of cement. We had no toilets. We used to have maybe a dry dunny, that was all. When it rained, we never got paid. Public holidays, we never got paid.
Well, I'd never forget when I was young. I went into the boss's office and I was overawed by their ties and their suits, and the organiser took me outside and said, "You don't talk to these people, you talk at them. But I'm second class, you don't talk, you know." And I thought, oh yeah. So next time we went in, the bloke said, "Good morning." I said, "What the fuck's good about it?" I thought, I'll try it, you know. And it worked. He shit himself. I thought, oh, Jesus, where's this been?
When I came out here at first, I mean, labourers were second class. I mean, not just labourers, building workers, because I mean, you didn't get public holidays, you didn't get sick pay. And then, I mean, no coverage whatsoever, sort of thing, not for anything. All you got was your holiday pay at Christmas. Whereas everybody else in Australia was getting public holidays, all these things, you get nothing.
Honest, we'll treat it like shit. I'll never forget down Port Melbourne, and this Irishman said, "We've got to get a shed, our clothes hang up." So we got us a shed, and then the bosses kept putting tools in the shed, you know, we had to get rid of that. It was a constant fight. And the boss came out from his office and said, "The next fucking thing yous will be wanting is water, hot water." And the Irishman looked at me and said, "That sounds pretty good."
I was working a job and we got no toilets. We have to go across the road in the pub. And I was a shop steward in the job. And I say, "Listen, no toilets, no go. We come in the morning, we stop." He said, "You can't do that. I say, I'll show you. We call a meeting. We don't go home, but we sit in one lunchroom, everyone. We stop, toilets come. After that, we got no pie warmer, no fridge. We stop again till you get the fridge. We got the pie warmer, we got the water, everything, coffee, everything. And the boss turned around and said, you got to supply your own coffee. No, you got to supply the coffee and milk. He said, you told the workers. I said, you come in the morning, you told the workers, and what did I get to say? He was in the morning up there. He said, everybody got to supply coffee and sugar. They say, up years, we stay here till you bring it. In half an hour, he go in a tiny shopping center, he got everything, and he said, keep going. Then he said to me, are you happy? I said, not me, as the workers happy.
There was a change, I don't know what it was. I mean, the old people, the older ones in us, they went through wars and all that, and they come back and they didn't want this crap now. No, they fought overseas and they all started jacking up as well. And then you had a younger breed coming through that weren't prepared to put up with what their fathers put up with, sort of thing and that. No? So you could see the change coming then, and that was in early 70s, late 60s, early 70s sort of thing.
When I came in, you had smoko sheds, you had coffee, tea, sugar, safety, a whole range of conditions that I enjoyed. And then we had the older blokes telling us how it was won. I mean, we'd have some of the blokes there telling us, oh, look, I remember it wasn't that long ago, you know, you had to bring your own pick and shovel to work. And we sort of used to laugh about it, but we knew it was true. And we just couldn't get a grasp of that. That's how it was not that long ago.
I don't know of any condition that workers have today that the employer has just handed over. Every condition, every dollar, every cent has been fought for over the years by unions and workers.
The good old days, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. It's what you got today. And we got good things. We got good pay, good conditions. It's really turned around. It's good. You got safety. You got kids that quote you safety. Come up to me and tell me not to work on my own. It's not safe. I'm going, the fuck are you? But you're right. Don't tie your leads up. And it is better. But to go back and say the good old days, I don't believe in that. It wasn't good old days. It was fucking hard old days.
Until the 1980s, building unions across Australia were covered by separate state awards, but that was about to change.
I remember when I was working on a job in about 1979 and 80, there'd been a big campaign by building unions to level up wages and conditions for construction workers around the country, and that was a campaign that they fought to win a national building award, and that really became the vehicle for building unions to pursue wages and conditions for about the next 10 or 20 years via using the award system, so that when there was an increase negotiated or won, the unions made sure that those increases got put into the award. So it didn't just apply to a small group of workers, that it then flowed to all construction workers around the country. Mick, what's happening this morning?
In Victoria, the building industry group of unions, known as the Big Group, is a key industrial group coordinated by the Victorian Trades Hall Council.
Out of the 56 Olympic Games in Melbourne, a building industry agreement was formulated, and the BIG, or the Big Group, helped police that industrial agreement for all big commercial building sites from Melbourne through the 50s right through. Back then, there was at least 14 building unions. You know, 2 plasterers unions, the painters, the bricklayers, the BLF, the ASC&J, the BWIU, the FEDFA, it goes on and on. Now, we're down to the plumbers union, the electrical trades union, the CFMEU, and the AMWU, the manufacturing workers union, because they have some construction workers. So we're down to 4 from 14.
The ACTU decided we need 20 super unions, and that's what created the CFMEU.
A lot of things were happening at the same time. You had BLF deregistration and all the hatred on all sides of the union divide and the building industry.
There were some people coming in the union that thought, well, maybe we can create a bigger and better union out what's happened.
We then got united and then started fighting who was supposed to fight. It is the employers.
We just had to get on with it because, you know, if we were scrapping, conditions were frozen which meant, and safety and everything else would be declining on the jobs as well. So we just had to get on with the job.
And that's when we made our big gains. Once we stopped fighting amongst each other, that's when we sort of just went in leaps and bounds. And if you look at it all, it's an evolution.
Arising out of the deregistration of the BLF in the mid-80s, part of the industrial political settlement of all of that was the creation of a VBIA, the Victorian Building Industry Agreement.
All of the parties to the industry become signatories to the agreement. All of the employer associations, all of the unions that had existed at the time, and the Victorian government.
There was also the Victorian Building Industry Consultative Committee that again had all the unions on it, all the employer bodies on it, and it was chaired by two representatives, one from the Master Builders and one from Trades Hall. And that body met monthly, the Victorian Building Industry Agreement Consultative Committee, and a lot of good things at the time came out of that. One of the key elements of the Victorian Building Industry Agreement was, of course, dispute settling procedure, because part of the deal was that if we were going to get these guaranteed wages and conditions, the employers wanted to be able to settle disputes more quickly. So the VBIA Disputes Board was set up.
And that's what the industry always wanted, a fast-track method of solving the problems. Most of the disputes that we've had get resolved pretty quickly. The success rate's been tremendous. And we're talking about since '87, and there's been a lot of water gone under the bridge and a lot of issues, and we've covered all of them.
After the 93-96 legislation that Keating brought in, the enterprise bargaining agreement regime started to grow through the 90s and into the 2000s. The VBIA survived right up until about 2001-2, but by then the EBAs became sort of the vehicle for wages and conditions, where unions negotiated on behalf of their members with the individual employer. The ingredients of the VBIA were then absorbed into EBAs.
Conditions of the VBIA were incorporated into them, but then there was intervention by other parties, the work choices legislation and others. The VBIA outlawed pyramid subcontracting, which has crept back into the industry now. The VBIA had a commitment from the employers, and the unions agreed that there'd be no all-in payments creeping back into the industry today. Meetings in this industry were absolutely essential for young workers and people to learn, to understand what a dispute or what a claim was about. To participate, to be able to participate in that process was absolutely essential.
Building workers have campaigned to not only refuse to install asbestos, because that was some of the earlier campaigns where you just sit on your bum and say, no, we're not going to put it in. But also, a little bit later, the campaign to remove asbestos. Now, you've got that information which had to be got around to building workers generally, that if you use this without protection, you could die. If you disturb this without protection, you could die. And if you remove it without the proper protection procedures, you could die.
We researched it, and we brought a lot of material from worldwide back into Victoria, and we also started to research what the history of it was here, what happened at the Whitnoo mine in Western Australia, and found out that a lot of these companies, including James Hardie, knew about the dangers long before and had kept it under wraps. So it became quite a big issue in the 80s.
No regulation, no government regulation about how to remove. All there was a ban on putting it into buildings. There was no rules, no rule book at all about how to do it properly.
I came to the industry back in 1989. I was actually introduced by my brother Tony, which is an organiser for the BWU back then. And the job that he actually introduced me to was an asbestos removal job in the centre of Melbourne, which was actually the old immigration building, which was called the Green Latrine. Within a few days, I actually did become the safety rep. There was about 80 or 90 Chileans who were actually working at the job, and since I spoke Spanish and English, and most of the guys that worked at that job did not speak any English whatsoever.
As always happens with the dirtiest and worst jobs, they end up going to the most newest migrants to Australia.
They were sending workers to work in areas that weren't safe enough. Like, we thought that there had to be bubble, blokes had to wear PPE in areas that the employer thought it wasn't necessary.
We made a lot of noise and basically just shut down jobs until they agreed, till the whole industry agreed that they would sit down and develop an agreed safe way to do it.
Well, what does it look like? Does it look like a professional job?
The industry itself, the building industry and asbestos removalists, had a protocol, and that was embodied in an agreement called the Veric Agreement. The Veric Agreement, which was negotiated by the building unions and asbestos removalists and hygienists, the industry itself and the unions. And that clearly established what should be worn and the methods for removal.
It had pictures. It was translated into every language. The code also had a requirement for all workers to be trained in their language. We were able to turn a very dirty, unregulated, unorganised industry with no standards into, probably the best in the world in terms of how the work was done, the pride of those workers in their achievements. Was terrific.
And we wanted these changes to our industry. I mean, previously blokes used to work very unsafe. My brother was one of them. He used to come home with overalls wrapped around his waist and masked around his chest, and that's what's happened. He's no longer here, and he died nearly 2 years ago from mesothelioma, yeah. So the changes were necessary, yeah.
One of the great challenges that faces global construction unions in the next few years is to achieve a global ban on asbestos.
We've got standards that we've got to protect. We shouldn't sort of let go of things that we have earned through the years. We've got to be firm. We've got to say, hey, no, we've got these conditions, we're not going to go backwards.
It was not just conditions and pay on building sites that needed protection. The union started to campaign for wider benefits.
The Interlink was actually formed, got back to probably about 22, 23 years ago. And once again, things are born out of industrial campaigns. It was not long after the Accord, we were going for an industrial wage campaign. And a portion of that was severance pay and a portion of that was a redundancy payment. So we were successful in that campaign, and then Interlink, the severance pay was established.
It set up a payment scheme that workers could get paid between jobs rather than just be penniless.
It's a fantastic fund because every month money goes into my account, and if I do lose my job, which does happen from time to time, it's the way the industry works, I've got a bit of a safety net, and I've got a young family, and like everyone else, a mortgage to pay, and at least I know in the back of my head if something does go wrong or if I do lose my job, I've got something to cover me for a little while.
And then the flow on from that was, well, we've got to look at some social things, so then we created through the years what Interlink delivers today.
Like trauma counselling, drug and alcohol abuse assistance, financial planning, insurance cover for leisure time and injury away from work. All these insurances and all these benefits came out of the VBIA and Interlink and the Consultative Committee.
In 1984, the industry superannuation campaign began.
People were saying it's impossible to bring in superannuation for workers that might be on the job for 1 week, 3 months, 1 year, then leave. We had run a case in '83 in the Commission for a wage increase. Our 22nd claim, I could recall, had super, and it was only a FERPI that we threw in at the time. Our money was knocked back by the Commission, but the Commissioner said, well, there is one aspect of your claim I'm prepared to hear, and it's number 22. It's superannuation. But we had to set up a superannuation fund, hence the campaign to establish CBUS.
Well, when I first started in the industry, the only ones who had super was staff people, board of directors, BHP board of directors. Workers didn't have super.
Organisers from all building unions right around Australia then went out to campaign to sign builders up.
Being a young bloke, we never sort of worried about super, you know, like you sort of work here and there, you never worried about it. But now it has changed. Our blokes have realised that is our future.
Cbus Properties, as it's now known, would have investments of something like $1.5 billion in and around Melbourne and interstate, and will get bigger. The wealth will increase, and it's the biggest, fastest growing industry in Australia is superannuation.
I should understand that by the time I'm ready to retire, I'm not going to have a pension. It'll be my superannuation fund. That's what I'm going to need to live on for the rest of my life.
This is a great scheme. You know, workers will be going out with an option. We should have probably grabbed it in 1908 when it was on the banner.
I think it's one of the greatest good achievements that the union has got, sort of thing, no. When you look back now, but I mean, at the beginning, it was... We'd never heard anything like these sort of thing. All we were interested in was getting wage rises, sort of thing, but this was a different way, sort of thing.
But we will come into problems. There will be attempts to diminish the union's influence into superannuation, and that could be by all sorts of means. Saying that as a trustee you have to have an economics degree from the Melbourne University before you can apply for being a trustee. And that means union officials will be cut out overnight.
One of the things my father always taught me was, and always said to me, and I came from the Glasgow shipyards, they never walk away from a union meeting asking, I should have said this or I should have said that. Voice your opinion, even though it's right or wrong.
Express your view. Doesn't matter how stupid the question sounds, ask the question. Because if you don't ask it, you'll never know. And I've been at a couple of meetings where I've even had the feel, gee, I should ask this question, they might think I'm an idiot. And I ask it, and then afterwards, after the meeting, you get about, 20, 30 people come up, gee, I'm glad you asked it, because I didn't know what it was either. So young people have got to be involved. It is their future. We're building it for them.
As a shop steward and a safety rep, the first job I started on, it was very difficult. I had a lot of support from the union itself, but on the job I didn't have a lot of support, and I basically learnt my trade on that one project. I made a lot of mistakes, but I've definitely learnt from those mistakes, and I think a lot of old guys would look at a young bloke thinking, who is he to tell me I'm not working the right way as far as safety goes and all that. And then I had other old guys that were, I think, looked down and thought, this young guy's having a bit of a dip here. We should be giving him a chop out, and I got some help. The union obviously gave me a lot of support too. I had a lot of organisers who would come down and visit me on the job and, just make sure I was okay. And if I had issues, I'd always tell them and they'd help me sort them out.
The shop steward represents the CFMEU. He's more or less, you could say, the flag bearer for the union on that site. If any of our members have like day-to-day problems, any general issues they have, they'll generally go to him. If it gets bigger than that, he will then contact the official that looks after the area, and he will then take over and, along with the shop steward, to start looking after the more serious issues. But the delegates at a day-to-day, he's the contact point, and he's very, very important. He's more or less the frontline troop for the union. You can't be a shop steward and not be accountable to the members.
At the end of the day, my shop steward sits in the hot seat, and if he's going to cop bullets, I want to be able to sit there with him and try and get him through it. And he's the one, I'll ultimately ask him what does he want to do and what decision he wants to make, and whatever he decides on is what I support. I might just tweak it up or tweak it down a little bit, depending on what's better for the union and what's not.
Without our delegate structure, we would virtually cease to exist. It's the structure that has built this union.
We've seen many years where workers have been forced to work in unsafe conditions in our industry. We've seen a lot of circumstances where workers have their entitlements ripped off by unscrupulous employers, Phoenix companies and so on. And more recently, we've seen the emergence of the exploitation of guest workers who are being brought to this country in order to be exploited and to be used to force down the wages and conditions of Australian workers. No fault of theirs, but that is the way the industry actually works in many countries around the world.
Another issue that is big is racism Racism's a huge issue on building sites at the moment. I've been involved in one situation that was a fascinating story on a job when I was a delegate. Everyone knows when the Chinese come and they bring their hot pots to work, they usually come with these triple-decker hot pots. And what had happened, we got the pie warmers on site, and what had happened, the Aussie blokes had turned up and they had put their meat pies in the pie warmer, and they closed the doors and they switched it on and off they go to work. The Chinese had turned up and they've ripped off the doors of the pie warmer, taken out the middle shelf to be able to stick their triple deckers in, and then they've put the doors back on. Off they go to work. Next minute I'm sitting in my office and an Aussie bloke come in and he's going off his head about his pie. Anyway, I went up into the sheds just to see what was going on because I got a phone call saying that it was about to get very, very heated. And when I got up there, I finally worked out that when the Chinese got there that morning, they stuck that many hot pots into the pie warmer that they had splattered the Australian bloke's meat pie all over the back of the pie warmer, and he turned around and said to me, "It's one thing I hate, and that's in the middle of winter, a cold pie." So not only was it cold, it was actually smashed up against the back of the oven. So there was a bit of a racial fight that day, but I calmed it right down, and I've got to say the boss helped me do it too. So he provided the new pies.
Migrant workers, the new ones that come in, you have to talk, have to explain. Here what sort of condition we have before, what sort of condition we have now. The other day, one of the boys worked 2 years in industry up there, the Chinese, and he got a throat cancer. He got told by the doctor to leave another 2 months. And what we did, we called all the other Chinese. I pull $100, Mick pull $100, and we said to him, we got to collect money for this boy. We collect about $2,000. And we say, double up, the boss got to pay the rest. Well, we collect, he pay another 2. But you see, and now we got in our side the boys. They come in, they say, oh, these people look after us.
Communication sometimes is hard to sort of let them know what they're entitled to and all the rest. But, you know, most people, when you get down and you actually sit there and talk to them, good, honest people that are just trying to, you know, fair day's work for a fair day's pay.
One of the traps that a union official can fall into is to see a worker's problem as just one of many problems. But to that worker, it's perhaps his only problem in several years of working experience. So to him it's a big thing. And he judges the worth of a union by how you deal with his problem, whether you've done it right, whether you're fair income, put it that way.
During its 2000 enterprise bargaining campaign, the CFMEU's Victorian branch initiated a campaign for a 36-hour working week.
We decided at that particular time that we should go for a 36-hour week campaign.
Now open it up for questions and comments.
And it's been a long-term aim. I mean, ever since I started in the construction industry, the dream was shorter working hours.
Construction workers had long been arguing for and discussing shorter hours in the industry. There'd been some jobs that had been working on a 36-hour week since the 1980s, but most jobs were 38. There was a need to do something.
We were told by a lot of people, years are gone mad, you won't win it.
There were discussions with the employers about it. They rejected any notion of shorter hours out of hand. Eventually negotiations were unsuccessful, and so the union then notified employers that we were going to start to take industrial action under the Workplace Relations Act in order to try and get agreements that contain shorter hour provisions.
It's no good sort of making a claim for something that people aren't interested in. It's got to be something that they can see the value in, that they've had some say in forming that log of claims, and then you got to involve them in every step of the campaign along the way. So there were mass meetings held of the membership. We embarked on a campaign to pursue that claim.
The employers got together and tried to put together a big campaign to breakers.
So they'll keep changing the fucking goalposts.
They tried to persuade workers that shorter hours were bad for the industry. They put up propaganda saying that the industry would be destroyed, that jobs would be destroyed if shorter hours were successful. We did end up in a situation where the employers responded to some bans and limitations that workers had put on by trying to lock the entire industry out.
They locked workers out for a period of 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks over various different jobs. The union membership stuck together, they weighed in.
We just told our members to ignore the lockout notices and do report for work. The organisers had bolt cutters to get through gates if they needed to, and it was done a couple of times.
The strategy from the employers was failing. Some of the significant employers broke away and started direct talks with the union about a solution to the problem, and a solution was reached.
We'd sign them up and then announce to the rest of the industry, ignore the MBA, come in and sign the agreement, or we continue on with the campaign on your jobs. And that group of breakaway employers that have signed with us, well, their jobs were working unrestricted.
We helped to, as much as possible, create a division between the employers. We were ready to negotiate with anyone who wanted to negotiate on proper terms.
And we actually won it under the political climate that existed then. We sort of all went out and we showed everyone, a new generation of building workers, what could be achieved, and we won it, and we're proud to still have our calendar to this day.
The master builders were sidelined in that process. Their members walked away from them, and ultimately what we did was come up with a pragmatic solution that delivered good wage increases for workers, but also importantly broke through on shorter hours. It was a breakthrough that the union movement hadn't achieved for many years, and very importantly, all of the doom and gloom that the employers talked about, where they said jobs had been destroyed, proved to be rubbish. In fact, what we saw in the construction industry in Victoria after shorter hours were achieved was a sustained boom in commercial property, in commercial construction, and the arguments the employers put forward were proved to be utterly false.
If you fight for it and you win it, you're going to appreciate it and you're going to fight to hang on to it.
If you look at all the struggles of the past, right, there's one thing that sticks out the most, and that is once the people are united and they stick together, well, they're unbeatable.
We had a new whole industrial relations system. We had Peter Reef and the Liberal government come up with work choices. We can no longer rely on the award and the accord to give us wage increases, and without a doubt the CFMEU, the union, has got more out of enterprise bargaining than any other union around the country.
Reith gave a speech in which he talked about a number of industries, which included coal mining, the maritime industry, the meat industry, and in particular the building industry, where he believed that union power needed to be curbed.
And the CFMEU was a militant industrial union because it was standing up for its members' health and safety. So out of that, we had a Royal Commission created.
This was motivated by a couple of things. Firstly, Howard saw the role that the CFMEU had played in defending the Maritime Union of Australia, in particular the early morning march down to Swanson Dock, which was crucial in winning that dispute. Secondly, the achievement of a shorter hours campaign in Victoria in the teeth of a Howard government was unacceptable to Howard. We believe that he didn't forgive us for that.
The union had to make a decision about whether we were going to cooperate with that commission or not. Cole, he wasn't going to be doing the union any favours. We really reckoned he had a predetermined outcome that he's going to be delivering.
The whole Royal Commission was a kangaroo court because it was all based on all hearsay of what someone had reported behind closed doors to the Royal Commission, and then we had to go up and answer all those questions. We weren't allowed to defend ourselves.
Destroy militant unionism, that was their brief. But it was about destroying people as well.
Part of Cole's tactic was to intimidate people.
Thousands of people were dragged through that commission around the country to give evidence, to be interrogated under threat of jail if they didn't answer questions. Rank and file building workers.
Before they went in there, they knew they were guilty, That's where they were treated as being guilty.
This really was a politicisation process of the members. And what we would do when a member had to front the Royal Commission, we wouldn't leave that person go up on their own. So jobs would stop, walk up to the Royal Commission with that individual, and that way we put into effect the slogan of touch one, touch all.
You know, you're in the box, you're getting interrogated. These people had tremendous resources, so before they've called you into the box, they've done all their background checks on you. They've done all their mobile phone checks on you. They know who you've rung at particular times of the day. They know what's in your bank. They know everything about you. And you're there as an individual, as a rank and filer. And it was just about tearing people apart, tearing us down, our people down, because, you know, our strength is our people. It's our rank and file. It's our members on the job prepared to say, no, not going to do that. It's not the right way.
They targeted the union structures, and one of the strengths they quickly found out was that there was a strong link between the union, its officials, shop stewards, and then its members.
The Commission had decided that our training unit was a particularly useful tool in terms of our organising strategy and developing up our membership and our stewards, and try and find out how it ticked and who was involved in it and what shop stewards came to the courses to mentor new shop stewards. They just wanted to unearth all of that. You know, they got to this position where they wanted the name of a shop steward who had gone and spoken at a shop steward's course. Just ridiculous, but we would defend our own actions, but we weren't going to talk about anybody else's actions.
Our shop steward structure is second to none, and they're a very, very important, integral part of the union. They're actually probably the most important part of the union.
Industrial relations is one thing, you know, the normal push and pull of industrial relations, strikes, stoppage, losing your job, losing your pay. But this Royal Commission was about something else. It was about breaking our morale, it's about breaking our hearts. And it's a real tribute to our people that they took it, they stood up to it, saw it through, and continued to kick goals. We negotiated a collective enterprise agreement in the middle of the hearings of the Royal Commission.
Not one member, organiser, shop steward, delegate or official of the CFMEU was ever charged, let alone convicted of any criminal offence coming out of the terms of reference of the Coal Royal Commission.
This is why, during that process, the whole thing of the kangaroo became the symbol of the Royal Commission. It was a kangaroo court.
They found nothing. What they did do was set a template for radical deregulation of workers' rights and regulation of employers' rights to actually attack union activity in the industry.
The Royal Commission was really a curtain raiser for what was to come, because what came out of the Royal Commission was a legal framework designed to weaken the union.
One of the reasons Howard put the ABCC in there is to keep us off the projects and to put us in jail for refusing to give our workmates up, refusing to attend interviews. And if you keep unions away from workers, then the employer uses and abuses safety. And when you start cutting corners, then you have fatalities and major accidents.
We want to move straight off. I take it there's no great questions or hesitation.
The ongoing struggle against the EBCC will continue till the EBCC is gone. We have a lot of officials who go up in charities every day. We have a lot of rank and file members who go up, and the only way we're going to get rid of the EBC is an industrial campaign.
We ought to have a return to proper rights for construction workers and equality with all other Australians in respect of their political and civil rights and their industrial rights in the industry they work in.
We all happy? Yeah. Off we go.
Bad laws sometimes have to be broken. And if you look at the construction industry, if it wasn't for us breaking some of them bad laws, we'd still be sitting on cement bags with no lunch sheds, no OH&S, no safety at all. We'd be still breathing in asbestos if we followed the law. And I think confrontation is part of it, and we'll probably always have confrontation, and maybe that's what makes us a good, strong, tough union that we are.
You've got to have consultation, because I could fucking bargain if you're not going to back it up.
All these things are designed to limit workers' ability to take industrial action, because nothing's going to be given freely. We've got to sort of fight for those conditions, because it's by taking industrial action. Employers can do it. Employers can withdraw capital. Workers should be able to withdraw labour.
And that is why that we must continue the industrial struggle. We must be prepared to take industrial action. We cannot just sit back and think that these things are won always by negotiation, and never lose sight of that it's got to be won out of industrial action.
For the CFMEU, it is all part of an ongoing campaign.
What I'd say to the current officials and the current shop stewards and all of the members of the union, that they're charged with the responsibility to ensure that the sacrifices and struggles of the past were not in vain.
They created the foundation for us, and we've got to build on that, just as we'll leave the foundation for the next generation to build on.
I think a great fight is ahead of the young worker of today.
The union is there for one reason only. That's to improve wages and conditions and look after workers' rights. If you have a good organised site with a union rep, 9 times out of 10, that site is very, very safe, organised, and people are usually contented, and they work better because they know they're going to get the pay on a Thursday, they know the boss is not going to rip them off, and they've got somebody looking after them.
If you're going to be in the building industry, be the smartest that's in the building industry, because they're the ones that survive.
You've got to try and be active in the union, because if you want to work out and have a safe site, and you want to protect your long term, and you want to protect your wages and conditions, you should be active in the union.
Attend the meetings, do the training. The union offers a wide range of training. Get involved.
About the EBAs and they're not compliant or they are compliant.
You know, someone told me a long time ago, power in numbers, and if we do stick together, we can go a long way. But that's probably the biggest issue. People think that they just got to pay their money and all these things that they get on the job, and their wages are sort of handed to them on a silver platter. I think it's important to understand where they came from and go from there.
There's another challenge, which is to build an industry which actually treats working people with a bit of respect. Our vision is for an industry which sees workers well paid, that sees safe workplaces, that sees young Australians trained and educated so that they want to come and work in the construction industry. No one should doubt that the union, which represents more than 100,000 construction workers around Australia, is going to be resolute in its pursuit of that vision.
The union's good now. The union's better now than it has about 20 years ago. Much stronger. And I'm on my way out, but I think I'm a happy customer at the moment. If I hopped in the grave or a box, I could smile, think, fuck you, I'm going home. You know what I mean? And yeah, I'm a happy customer. I really respect the union now.